This virtual consultation is on crown hair transplant. I encourage you, first of all, to watch some of my lectures I've given on crown transplant for even more detailed information. This is going to be an overview and understanding what is the crown, why is it important, how do I do it, what are the risks, what are the limitations, and how to manage it. So, first of all, the crown is also known as a vertex. It is the round circle in the back of the scalp. Some people define crown as the top of the scalp, but this is actually in hair transplant terms the mid-scalp. The crown is on the back side. It's on the vertical plane of the scalp, so when you're looking at it, it's a big circle of loss when you're seeing it. It can be done obviously as an isolated procedure, or it can be done in combination with the front or the mid-scalp as well. So why do the crown? Well, the obvious reason is on the back side you can see a bald area. The other thing people don't think about is from the frontal view, because the hairs arch up over the front, that actually contributes to the frontal view. And even more importantly, the side view, if you look at a person that's balding, you can see that the back of the scalp is actually flattened out. And so when you create the crown on the back side, it creates a lush fullness from the side view, so that there's fullness from all angles, not just from the back side or the bleacher view, if you will. So in terms of a crown transplant, it is the single hardest area to create total visual density after a single session for several reasons. First of all, oftentimes the crown is done in combination with the front. So when you're trying to put in a mega session of like 3,000 grafts, about 6,000 to 7,000 hairs from front to back, you have to be able to leverage that transplant in a way that it looks maximally and optimally dense after a single procedure. In addition, oftentimes the front carries a higher degree of importance, because if you have a great crown but the front is totally empty, it doesn't, A, may look unnatural, and B, the person may not look aesthetically better without the frontal portion being done. So it's not often that a person has just an isolated crown, but if it does, obviously then I can allocate all the grafts in one area and it's a different story. The other reason is that it's called a billboard effect, which is when you look at the crown, you look at it head on like this. You look at the bald scalp. And the definition of baldness is not just the absence of hair, but looking at scalp. And so when you look at the top of the scalp, it's on an angle, so you don't see it as well. And all those grafts are lined up on an angle, whereas when you look at the bald crown, it's from a frontal view, from a head-on view, so it's harder to cover that bald crown. The other reason is that the hairs grow in a whorl. So when a whorl means a circle like this, so that they're all splayed open like this, so they're harder to create visual density, whereas in the front, all the hairs are growing in the same direction, so they're easier to stack together and layer together, create better visual density. The other reason why a crown is harder to achieve is a simple geometry, which I've talked about in some of my podcasts, pi r squared. I hate to bring up some scary math from high school, but the radius, which is the r squared, means there's 4 times the surface area that's necessary to create visual density. So you just double the radius, all of a sudden it takes 4 times the number of grafts to make that area look dense. And there's an ongoing expansion of that crown over time. Whereas the front, yes, you could have some dip going down of the sides, but usually the front, once it's done, doesn't have as much of a risk of exposure, ongoing exposure, where the crown has risk of ongoing exposure. So you have to not only plan for the coverage today, but also plan for future loss. And that's why in general, I'm not a big fan of doing crowns in someone under the age of 35, although I've done it in select cases, because I have to predict that future issue for that patient as far as ongoing loss. So let's talk a little bit about how to restore the crown. So first, medicine. I encourage you to watch some of my podcasts and listen to my podcasts or watch some of my videos on medical hair loss and virtual consults, just considering hair loss for men or for women. Crowns are usually men, but I have actually done crowns in women as well. Usually they're much smaller, much easier to manage than for men. However, the medical therapy can be so important. Why is it important? First, well, if we can limit that expansion of that crown over time, then we can preserve the surgical result and also preserve the donor capacity for future issues. So medical therapy, such as topical finasteride, minoxidil, etc., can be so important as part of the regimen. Second of all, it can add a lot of visual density. So let's say that area is miniaturizing, means the hairs are becoming thinner. Well, the medicine can already bring those hairs back to life and make them super thick. In some cases, that's all you need. You don't even need the surgery. And sometimes I'm doing a transplant to the front, and that early to middle miniaturization in the back, I'm just using medicine to do the work and not even doing surgery. Of course, this is going to be mainly focused on the surgical restoration of the crown, but I think it's worth to state that the medicine to me is vital when I'm doing crowns to limit further expansion and to further enhance the results, especially for the younger patient. So let's talk about how do I do the surgery, and what are the methods of restoring the crown, and then we'll talk about the actual design. So as you know out there, there are two methods of doing crown transplantation. There's FUT or strip, also known as linear strip excision or LSE, and also FUE, which is the more popular today because people are worried about a scar, harvesting one at a time. And that's actually false because there's still little dots of scars. But when I look at a crown, I try to avoid the hype. I really try to think about what would be best suited for this patient. And FUE and FUT are both eligible techniques for patients. So what are the benefits of FUE? Clearly, if you're wearing your hair shorter, it's not scarless, but if you wear your hair shorter, there's less of a risk of a visibility of a linear incision. However, the FUE does have several issues. The thing that people don't talk about, and I've talked about this in many of my lectures, etc., is that the total donor capacity, meaning the total available number of grafts to be harvested with FUE without having that backside look moth-eaten or over-harvested, is much less than what is possible in most cases with strip procedures. So when I have a huge crown to tackle and I'm trying to do that with FUE, it's almost impossible without damaging the donor hair. It depends. If you've got incredible donor capacity and your crown is not that large, yeah, FUE is great. I do a lot of transplants in the crown with FUE. But if the crown is medium to larger and your density is not the highest 1.5% of that density, FUE may not be the best option because of not burning out all your donor hair in the crown. The second is a concept of safe donor area. So safe donor area means if I harvest far away from the edge of recession of hair loss, those grafts should be permanent. I mean, you can never guarantee because there's a lot of other factors, but in general, if I stay in the permanent zone, I get a higher chance that those grafts will survive, hopefully for the rest of your life. Can't guarantee it, but in general, that's the case. With FUE, because I have to harvest such a wide area, if I have also encountering a large crown, I've got to get into areas that are relatively unsafe. So the upshot of this is if you've got a smaller crown and more limited and not so much frontal loss, FUE can be, and good density, you can be an excellent candidate for FUE. But if you've got a large area and a relatively unsafe wave coming forward, the strip should be your better procedure because of preservation of total donor capacity, as well as staying away from the unsafe area. Now, is strip always the right answer? Not necessarily. I have to look at you to make a decision. Is FUE always the right answer? As I said, no, not really. For me, the biggest thing when I'm looking at this, trying to decide, even if you're safe to do a crown, because you may come in and I go, you can't do the crown. You're not safe. You're not safe for FUT or FUE. Why would that be the case? A lot of factors. It's a question of supply and demand. So what does that mean? Supply means what do you have to give and what do you need up here? If your frontal area has so much loss that I have to prioritize that, or I encourage you to prioritize that, then I won't have enough hairs, possibly if I'm doing FUE or FUT. I may not have enough for that. So that's one component. If your donor area is just not as dense as I want and your crown is too large, there's a huge demand and a limited supply, I won't be able to do your crown effectively or safely. If you're super young, as I told you, under the age of 35, maybe 30, and you've got a crown that's just starting to open, you think, oh, that's not a big deal, doc, go ahead and just fill that in. And I create this super packed density and that area expands, we may have a situation of risk within the next 5 years that I can't cover it, or you've got a dense patch that doesn't look right. So how do I make this judgment? There's so many factors in that judgment that go into my head as I think about it. I just had a patient last week that was offered 4,500 grafts FUE. No way. The guy, he was offered this at a clinic where basically he was meeting with a salesperson rather than a doctor. He barely has 2,000 grafts for me to do the work, and he definitely cannot do the crown safely, whether it's FUE or FUT. And in his situation, actually, I couldn't do an FUT because he had see-through, which the scar would be visible. Now, in terms of scars, I get oftentimes very hard to see scars, maybe just a millimeter or 2 millimeters at most, but oftentimes not even visible. That's why I get so many barbers sending me patients. But honestly, I need to make a read of supply and demand. And that's not just current supply and demand. It's also thinking about what's going to happen in 10 years. Where is it in 15 years? Where is it in 20 years? So the crown is the area that I'm always thinking, number one, underlying safety. Can you even get this transplant safely? And I'm going to be talking to you about safety, about current safety, future safety, and how to think about those terms of safety. Let's now talk about the surgical technique of how to do a crown. Okay, so we talked about safety, talked about candidacy, etc. So when I look at a crown, if it's a blank slate, okay, where there's just no hair there and I can design it however I want, that's what I would do. Now, what I would do is if you're combing from left to right, I will oftentimes create the whorl, the center of the whorl, this, the circle, up top left. Now, why is that? Several reasons. One is that it follows your part, so it doesn't compete against your parting hair. So it also arches up over the part and creates better visual density. Remember I told you that you get visual density from the front as well. So if I can arch my whorl over the part, I get better visual density. Also, there's a concept that I've talked about also in my podcast called the cascade effect. What that means is if one hair is up here and it travels over this long a distance, it creates better visual density than one just the fringe of the hair going out. So I want to create enough that leverage that cascade. So every hair, every graft acts more like 10 grafts. But if you just create this deep, heavy whorl on top because of this cascade effect and create this limited whorl below it, it's not going to look natural. It looks sort of weird. So you need to leverage the cascade effect toward optimal density, but you also don't want to create so much density up here and less density here that it doesn't look right. A colleague of mine actually argues that you should put a lot of hair on the density on the periphery and not in the center, because that will help for future hair loss because it looks more natural toward the center being bald. Well, first of all, who the heck wants to look bald in the middle? The second of all, those grafts in the periphery, pi r squared, you're doing the outer radius, requires so many more grafts of thickness. You're using and wasting grafts, in my opinion. Plus, if you have progression of that crown beyond that border, you're going to have even more loss, and you're going to have this donut ring that looks even weirder. So what's my opinion, you've got to create density gradients that create and cover a cascade even over advancing baldness. That may be difficult to understand, but I encourage you again to watch some of my lectures on this subject where I have the visuals and explain that a little bit more in detail. But that's one component. The other component, remember I said from the side view that you want to create a visual lift? What's interesting is when I do the front, I create very low angles because otherwise they look surprised and you can actually it doesn't look natural. But from the crown, I do the exact opposite. As I go to the crown, I create very high sights. The recipient sights are very, very high oriented, almost perpendicular to the scalp. There's several reasons for this. One is the fact that, first of all, if you look at transitions on the scalp, there are no abrupt transitions. If you look at the side view, profile view of the scalp, the angles go like this and then back down on the back side of the crown. Go look at your friend who's non-balding, you'll see this. So first of all, it mimics nature. Nature actually does this. The second of all is when I create the vertical lift on the back side, the perpendicular sides, it creates the vertical lift that we need to restore that roundness from the side view that doesn't have that flattening effect. The other reason is as the grafts come up and down, they actually create a better visual density. Now this one is also very hard to understand, but when I create a whorl, all my sights under the skin are competing with one another. So if they're all going very low angled like this, all my sights would join. But when they're angled up, they're very limited space under the skin, and I can densely pack them like a sardine going around. So you want to create a whorl that's tight and high for all of these reasons. Again, this is not meant to be a 30 or 45-minute lecture on how I design it, but just some of the basic principles. And I encourage you again to explore if you would like to know how exactly I design it when you look at some of those other videos. So that's the basic understanding of how to do a crown transplant.